work less and get paid more. It's what the Canadian Federation for Independent Business has found to be true for public sector workers. But when it comes to doing the same exact job in the private sector, well, they're getting the short end of the stick. A new report released this week from the CFIB shows that, on average, private employees make 18 to 37% less than their public counterparts, and they work about 6 hours more each week.
What we have found out is that there is significant advantage if you work in the public sector. Actually, you work less hours and you make more money. The difference comes to, on average, about $8,000 a year.
The CFIB says this kind of public-private wage gap is nothing new, thanks to unions and collective bargaining agreements.
This has been compounded over many years, and now we are at a stage where, especially in Ontario, the difference is 26%. So you work in the same job, but you get paid less and you get less benefits just because you work in the private sector. The reason for that is that the private sector cannot afford to go to these levels. The public sector can, because taxpayers ultimately foot the bill.
And it turns out that price tag for taxpayers isn't cheap.
The ultimate price tag that we estimate is $20 billion a year. That's what it takes to subsidize that wage gap. And that's a very significant amount of money. So it comes from, obviously, our taxes, at the same time leaving less room for those who work in the private sector to be able to put aside for, let's say, their own retirement.
The CFIB argues the answer to boosting retirement savings for Ontarians is closing this gap and not implementing the government's proposed mandatory pension plan.
If that wage gap is eliminated or significantly reduced, there will be more capacity for those who work in the private sector to be able to set aside more money for their own retirement. And that is the message that we delivered earlier this week down at Queen's Park, because obviously the government is adamant in pursuing and establishing their mandatory Ontario retirement pension plan. We don't believe it should be mandatory. It should be something that is voluntary for those who actually have the capacity to contribute.
Now, the CFIB says they know changes won't happen overnight, but they're hopeful the government will at least look at the data and take steps to close the wage gap. I'm Emily Pratt with TheRebel.media.